This is Cultish Tendencies 8 and is entitled When the Bubble Bursts, the Abu Khadijites in Disarray. And the focus of this discourse will be the apparent implosion that is taking place amongst this cult in light of the dispute that is occurring between three of their four scholars, Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi, Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabri, and Sheikh Abdullah Bukhari. Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi has recently recorded an audio, part one of a series it seems, entitled "The Moment Has Now Come for Mohammed bin Hadi to Break His Silence and Publicize Something of That Which is Inside His Quiver." Close quote of the title. And approximately 35 minutes into his speech, he says concerning Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabri, quote, "The speech of Sheikh Ubaid, when he retracted, was an error, and that which is correct was his first speech. As for his second speech, then it is false. It is in opposition to the concession of the people of Sunnah and their foundations," close quote. And if we rewind and go back a month, the preceding month, November 2017, Sheikh Ubaid is asked a question regarding one of his students, Abdullah al-Rifai al-Juhani, in relation to a criticism from Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi of this particular student. And Sheikh Ubaid's response, part of his response, is heard clearly, and it is as follows, quote, "Don't be deceived by the warnings of Ibn Hadi. The warning of Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi, do not be deceived by it. Don't give it any importance and do not pay any attention to it whatsoever." Close quote. And before proceeding to the tweets that have been coming from the Abu Khadijite members, the reason I've referred to Abdullah Bukhari as being part and parcel of this current dispute is based on that same recording from Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi in which he asked, where is Abdullah Bukhari in this? Why is he remaining in silence? What is he silence for? And that was said, if you listen to the context, that is an indirect criticism of Abdullah Bukhari. But referring to the tweets now, the dispute is obviously causing consternation and concern and apparent division among the Abu Khadijites in their heartland of Birmingham. And listen to one of the recent tweets, quote, "You've heard right, Akh. The brothers who go to Wright Street Masjid, in brackets, Abu Khadija's Masjid, close brackets, and Aston Masjid, in brackets, Abu Hakim's Masjid, close brackets, are very much divided, Akh. I was there last night. Some brothers are calling for Abu Khadija to stop giving durus. It's getting ugly, Akh." Close quote. That's quite a poignant tweet. But the last part, "it's getting ugly, Akh," I would disagree with the description, "it's getting ugly." Everything with the cult over the past 20 years, and if we look at the traits and the bitter fruits that have spread in almost every Western society and others as well, we see division, splitting, acrimony. You only have to refer to the previous cultish tendencies in which the traits of cults were described in how they divide and split. And the only ones who survive and remain with the cult are those who blindly follow. Anyway, continuing. Another cult member actually officially retracted and tweeted this from posting Sheikh Mohammed's audio. The intimation here is that he was censured and criticized by the faction of the cult that is siding with Sheikh Ubaid al-Jabri and against Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi's speech, but they haven't said that openly yet. So this is the reason, or the only logical reason, why this cult member officially retracted from posting Sheikh Mohammed's audio. And this brings me on to a tangent that I want to draw when we look at blind following, when we look at personality worship. I want to refer to a very well-known personality who we know and has influenced many of us after reading his autobiography, none other than Malcolm X, Malik Shabazz, rahimahullah. And there's a key area where he described his relationship and how he viewed the leader of the Nation of Islam at that time, Elijah Muhammad. And on page 311 of his autobiography, he says, quote, "My adoration of Mr. Muhammad grew in the sense of the Latin word adore. It means much more than our adoration or adore. It means that my worship of him was so awesome that he was the first man whom I had ever feared. Not fear such as a man with a gun, but the fear such as one of the power of the sun." Close quote. So we see that Malcolm looked at the leader of the cult with such reverence, such awe. And you only have to listen to the tweets in support of Abu Khadija, Abu Hakim, and other cult members, the adoration, the almost seeking approval from them in these tweets, these stock words that they use all of the time to please their leader. And when you compare this to other cults as well, and you see the deference that is given to the leaders, the Abu Khadijites are no different. We also see that they forego reason, intellect, constructive examination and research of things in the same way that Malcolm X did. And let's listen to another part of his deference, his reverence of his leader, page 301 of his autobiography. "I don't think I could say anything which better testifies to my depth of faith in Mr. Muhammad than that I totally and absolutely rejected my own intelligence." I'll read that again. "I don't think I could say anything which better testifies to my depth of faith in Mr. Muhammad." We can replace Mr. Muhammad with Abu Khadija, Abu Hakim, the Abu Khadijite leadership, "than that I totally and absolutely rejected my own intelligence." End of quote. So we see there that the followers, you can see from their tweets, you can see from their statements, you can see from the really ardent followers that everything goes back to Abu Khadija before they even think or use their own intellect, which is the disease of cultism. Also, with this fitna that is now brewing and this discord between the scholars, which was almost inevitable, and Allah knows best, because we look at disputes of yesteryear and we look at how the Abu Khadijites have acted. But what has come up and bitten them on the nose is that it's taking place amongst 4 of their remaining scholars. And they are trying to bury this and remain silent. They're trying to censor members of their cult from speaking about this. Yet we see from Malcolm X the stance that he took, which was slightly different from a cultist perspective, when he realized the infidelity of Elijah Muhammad was about to be exposed more widely in the public. He said, quote, "I remembered that when an epidemic is about to hit somewhere, that the community's people are inoculated against exposure with some of the same germs that are anticipated, and this prepares them to resist the oncoming virus. I decided I had better prepare 6 other East Coast Muslim officials whom I selected." End of quote. The Abu Khadijites don't seem to be preparing anyone for this. They want it to go away. They're working out their answer, their response, so they can come out looking clean and exonerated. It's very difficult to see how they're going to do that. As one colleague who's now aware of this situation said when contacting me via WhatsApp, I'll quote his message, the 22nd of December, 2017. Quote, "This is the biggest thing to happen in the Dawah since I've become Muslim. Bigger than the fall of the Maj, in my opinion. If they remain silent, this is the cult he's talking about, they break a whole load of principles they've destroyed people for over the years, i.e., lack of clarity, not following the detailed criticism, etc. Close quote. So this is an observation from a colleague of mine, and many have been making similar observations. And we only have to look at the questions of one of the students from Medina who's tweeted 10 questions to the Abu Khadijites, Abu Khadija in particular. And I will refer to some of them and paraphrase if need be. Question 1. What do you now do, Abu Khadijites? And this is in relation to Sheikh Mohammed bin Hadi's recent audio. Continuing, we have a jar that goes against the ta'deel. For years, you have been dropping sheikhs upon hearing a criticism from your 4 scholars. Question 2. Are you now going to say that Jah wa ta'deel is ijtihadi? The same thing many of the scholars have been saying for years, i.e. Sheikh Salih Suhaimi, Sheikh Salih Fawzan, Sheikh Luhaydan, etc. Are you now going to say it's from ijtihad? Question 3. Will you be abandoning Ad-Dufari, who you have brought to your gatherings during Hajj, and who is now an open advocate for Hani Buraik, who Sheikh Mohammed has labelled as treading the path of the Khawarij? As a tangent, some of you may not know who Hani Buraik is. Before, he was a shining star for Sheikh Rabi as a student. He was very close to the Saudi Abu Ziyad, Khalid Bagais, that is. And I met Hani Buraik on a few occasions when I first came to Saudi and got to know him through the duplicity in which he approached me with Khalid Bagais, Abu Ziyad, and presented a letter to me in Arabic, which they wanted me to hand to Sheikh Rabi' to seemingly draw me and Brixton closer to Sheikh Rabi'. This was the time, 2002, when I first came, and the dispute between Salafi publications, the Abu Khadijites, and Brixton Mosque was really at its peak, as I've mentioned previously. So they presented me with this letter in Arabic, saying it was talking about being upon the Sunnah, how we love the scholars and upon the Sunnah, and we don't follow anyone's mistakes like Abul Hassan al-Ma'rabi. And I thought, okay, they're genuine. Abu Ziyad and myself got to know each other a little bit through a mutual friend who he'd gone to Essex University with, not the Milk Sheikh. We're not talking about Amjad Rafiq, even though he knew him there as well, but another colleague of ours from Brixton. So I had an element of trust in the good that they wanted to do through presenting this letter. But they gave a condition. They said that the penmanship of Hani Buraik would be recognized by Sheikh Rabi' and that I should get the letter rewritten by another Arab, someone else's penmanship. So obviously I wanted to get the letter translated, and at an iftar that Ramadan 2002-2003, Hani Buraik and Abu Ziyad attended this iftar, and it's where I met Sheikh Mohammed al-Malki for the first time. And they asked him to read the letter, and he read it very generally. It was quite general, and I didn't see any issue with the generality of the letter. So after a few days, I went with my colleague Abu Abdullah, who had invited us to the iftar, and we went and sat with the mueddin from his local masjid, and he patiently rewrote the letter. I then shared that letter with the brothers in London from Brixton, and I went and presented it to Sheikh Rabi', who appeared happy at the letter. Lo and behold, it wasn't until I got a phone call from our brothers in Brixton who were also attending the Luton conference at the time with the Jordanian Mashaykh. And they called me and said, Abdul Haq, do you know what the content of this letter is? And I said, yes, it's about us being on the Sunnah. We don't follow mistakes of scholars and such and such. They said, yes, but it's also doing tabdir on Abul Hassan. And we've heard from Sheikh Rabi at that time, I hasten to add that we don't have to do, as a masjid and a community, it's not for us to do tabdir on Abul Hassan. And I was shocked at the content of the letter and what they'd read out to me. They said, Abdul Haq, if you believe he's a mubtadi and you're with it, and you've changed your opinion, fine, but the letter must come from you and Sheikh Rabi must come from you. I said, no, I'm with you, brothers. I don't do tabdi at that time on Sheikh Abul Hassan. So I felt quite deceived. Alhamdulillah, 2 students from Medina were visiting Jeddah, and one of them sat with me for an hour and a half until 3 o'clock in the morning, and he dictated and translated the letter, and I wrote it down in English. That's when I realized the treachery of Hani Boraik and him wanting to use Brixton as a vessel to try and bring this tabdir from a Western perspective to please Sheikh Rabi'. Anyway, that's Hani Boraik, my personal experience with him. And if Khalid Bagais hears this, he can verify whether what I'm saying is true or not. I'm prepared to meet him concerning this. And there are the witnesses, including the student of knowledge who has since graduated, who translated the letter and confirmed for me today in a WhatsApp that he remembers this occasion very well. And I've also spoken to Sheikh Mohammed Al-Malki, and I have a recording from him from a few years ago, actually, when I questioned him about the generality of his translation. And he elaborated even more that he asked them in that iftar, obviously in Arabic, why are you putting this brother through this? He is new to Saudi Arabia. Why are you writing this letter and insisting that he deliver this to Sheikh Rabi'? And I cannot remember the details of his answer, but he said they had a purpose they wanted to do this for. The recording's there. Anyone who wants to hear that recording, my question and answer with Sheikh Mohammed Al-Maliki in English when we were visiting Sheikh, on the way to visit Sheikh Wasiullah, I can make that available as well. Anyway, I've gone off and digressed. I will go back to one of the other questions from this current student of knowledge in Medina. He then asked, quote, are we going to see a public statement from the cult leader, Abu Khadija, freeing himself from these sheikhs? Close quote. Now, there are many more questions that have been asked, I'm sure will be asked, inshallah, but I have one question before we conclude to the Abu Khadijites, Abu Khadija in particular. In 2001, Abu Khadija made a very arrogant statement and questioned that, quote, we wait for the Lajna to correct its mistake, close quote. My question is a similar statement going to be made regarding whichever of the scholars that Abu Khadijites believe are wrong in this particular affair? Will that same statement be made that you wait for whoever it is, whichever sheikh, fulan or fulan, to correct his or their mistakes? Is that going to be a statement? Because it's only right and apt that you make such a statement after you directed such an insolent statement to the Lajna all those years ago. And for the cult followers who may or may not be listening, or those who have empathy or have sat on the fence regarding the cult, I want to conclude again with another quote from Malcolm X's autobiography. And this was when he was exiting the cult. This is when he wanted to adhere to truth and knowledge in the most purest form. And he said on page 483 of his autobiography, quote, I have had enough of someone else's propaganda. I am for truth, no matter who tells it. I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. Close quote. And suffice it for me to end with that particular quote to see if this cult and its adherents really are seeking truth, or they will find some way to wriggle out of this current fitna and remain upon the falsehood that they're upon. And Allah knows best.